Welcome on the Leaders Who Care. We have the 134th episode, and today we have the privilege to welcome John Klepper, who is the co-founder CEO of PIPRA. PIPRA has developed a cutting-edge AI-based pre-surgical tool for assessing patients' risk of suffering of post-operative delirium, of post-operative cognitive dysfunction in order to prevent it happening in the first place. The mission has been absolutely inspirational, and with over 18 years of serial entrepreneurship, John has successfully founded, grown, and exited multiple companies with a tenacity and vision, driven by a mission of solving some of the most pressing global healthcare challenges. I'm deeply interested in the conversation today personally, but also it just provides so much need and care for the patient's experience and solving so many critical problems. I'm super grateful to welcome John. Thank you for being here with us today and for the work you do. Welcome on the Leaders Who Care.
Thank you very much, Marianne, for that warm introduction. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Well, there's plenty more I'm sure I can mention, but that was as much as I can really capture and summarize. The rest will unveil during the discussion, John. Indeed, I personally have invested many years of researching how can we help people with better health habits, with better health care, and I'm deeply interested in the topic. And to be honest, it's so important, right? If you have health is wealth. So you can build a lot of things, you can do a lot of things, but if you don't, the thing you want is health. So it's everything becomes secondary if you lose your health. So would love to hear more about that particular mission and area, because it's such a wide space in healthcare, and why you've chosen that to make that particular impact in this field, and maybe starting with a little bit more about your own journey, John. Why do you do what you do today?
Great question. I think the why is the most important question any entrepreneur should ask when starting a business. I used to be in a very different industry, in entertainment, films and post-production, and I had a couple of companies that I ran and sold, and things were, life was good. I was, I guess, by many standards, I was successful. But I didn't feel successful. I didn't feel like I was. For me, the definition of success was not, what can I do with the money that I've made? And it started to bug me. It started to became a daily thing where I felt there was more to life, that I could potentially give back. And I started searching for the how. So the why was wanting to make a difference in people's lives beyond my own. And I didn't exactly know how to do that, if I'm honest. I just was driven by a desire to want to do good and to give back. And so I sold one of the companies that I had run for 7 years, and I took almost a year off, and I traveled around the world in search of the why, and to find some purpose, I think. And on that journey, I decided to start a social enterprise. And basically, it's a platform that allows for gamified giving and supports about 40 different nonprofits and charities around the world. So I created this company after my year off, and And then about 3 or 4 years later, I had a coffee with a neuroscientist who is quite renowned in the field of Alzheimer's disease. And the reason I was having a coffee with him is because someone close to me was suffering from Alzheimer's, and I, the entrepreneur in me was like, okay, there must be a solution. There must be a fix. I'm going to try to find it, right? I'm going to try to do what I can to help. So I reached out to my network and I asked a lot of questions, and I got connected to a bunch of people and eventually to this neuroscientist. And we had this coffee together, and it was turned into a 3-hour conversation of two entrepreneurs bouncing ideas together. And I've always had this like fascination with brain health. Don't know why. Just physical health, brain health, longevity, healthy aging, and the conversation was dynamic, fluid, and fun, and inspiring, and lots of exchanges of ideas. And at the end of it, he said, "Do you want to start a company with me?" So I was like, I'm not a doctor. I'm not a scientist. Why would you want to start a company with me in Alzheimer's disease? He said, "Well, I've got that part covered. I need somebody who understands business and understands why we need to do what we want to do, what I want to do." And I was like, okay, then let's give it a shot. So I took a deep dive, and every morning I got up and spent a couple hours reading journals and papers, and just trying to understand as much as I could about that field. Fast forward a couple of years, and I started to hear during stakeholder discussions and interviews in hospital, I started to hear about this problem, delirium. I didn't know much about it. And I certainly didn't know how prevalent it was, and how devastating it was to patients, and how little was being done about it. And also how closely linked it is to Alzheimer's. So as I was learning about this disease, I recall that my mother had told me a story about a surgery that she had had some years back, and what happened to her when she came out of surgery. Basically, she woke up a very different person. So for, previously very sharp cognitively, incredibly sharp, she was suddenly terrified. She thought the staff in the hospital were trying to kill her. She saw monsters coming out of the walls. She was hallucinating, and she was suffering from post-operative delirium. And so I had a conversation with her and asked her to describe it further and deeper, and that gave me a lot of motivation as I heard her story and how much she suffered to want to do something about it and try to improve and save lives in this field if it was possible. It's, you can lose a lot of things in life, but when you lose your cognitive capacity, you lose your memory, you lose your ability to take care of yourself, to be independent. I don't think there's anything worse. It's you lose your identity, and you lose your identity. What do you have? You can have all the money in the world, you can have all the fame in the world. If you don't have your memory and of the people that you love, and your life experiences, you have nothing. So that set me on the path, and trying to find a technological approach to solving this problem. So that's kind of the why.
Wow. John, this is thank you for bringing light to this problem. I'm sure many people may know of it, but I didn't know really about this, and hopefully people don't come to encounter it, as we all, we wish them well in life. But how serious is this issue with delirium? What's the impact in terms of population numbers? Because this sounds really, really big in terms of how does it affect people, and the impact would be tremendous to the family of the ones who are going through it.
Yeah, for sure. So just, I should say that my mother luckily made a full recovery. She has a type of PTSD from the experience in terms of, when she's terrified of hospitals and would refuse to go to hospital regardless of, her condition. So luckily she's in good health and stays in good health. But, if she doesn't at some point and needs to go to the hospital, that could pose a very serious problem. But a lot of people, unfortunately, don't recover. So to give you some numbers, delirium affects 23% of patients over the age of 60. So almost 1 in 4 patients admitted to a hospital will suffer from delirium. Now, if you think about 50% of hospital capacity on average is over 60, and a fourth of those people are suffering from delirium worldwide, that's staggering. So it's at least 60 million people per year. But it's probably much bigger than that because 70% of cases are missed or not diagnosed. And so it's a very big problem. To give you some perspective, it's 60% more expensive to healthcare than diabetes.
Wow.
And it's virtually unaddressed. And some of the long-term consequences, so 38% of patients with delirium will end up with long-term complications like dementia. It'll increase, if you have delirium, it'll increase the risk of nursing home admission by 600%. And if I was to ask you how much you think it increases the risk of dementia, what would you think?
Maybe twice, say 50 to 100%.
1,400%.
Wow.
So 14 times increased risk. So if
So
you have delirium,
wow,
your chances of dementia within a year go up significantly. Yeah, so those are some of the numbers, and our mission at PIPRA, which is the name of the company, is to create a world without delirium.
Wow. Just trying to a little bit dive deeper, and I love the name PIPRA. I'd love to hear a little bit more about the company itself. But how do we have any research of why delirium is happening at 1 in 4 patients, almost even more by the looks of it? And could it be prevented through the work you do? Or how could it be addressed, and why, I guess, is not being addressed in a way that you're doing right now for such a long time?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it can be prevented in up to 43 to 53% of cases can be prevented, depending on which studies you look at. It's been researched for decades. The incidence of delirium hasn't changed in 40 years, despite all these advances in healthcare and technology. Delirium has just gone very much under the radar. Part of the reason for that is I think that clinicians, while amazing and many of them are in the business of saving lives and improving lives, and are are to be applauded for what they do. Many of them kind of have assumed up until fairly recently that delirium is just a consequence of surgery, and some patients are a bit more frail, a bit older, and just a bit unlucky, and that just happens, right? There's nothing you can do about it. Well, now we know that it actually can be prevented. There are steps that can be taken by the hospital, by clinicians, to drastically improve outcomes. Bless you. And some of those things include, before surgery, looking at adapting daily medication. Some medications that patients are on are deliriogenic. They increase the risk. There's a new area in medicine called prehab. So we're all familiar with rehab, but prehab would be building up some resistance, reducing frailty before admission to a hospital, like, for elective procedures. Then you can monitor depth of anesthesia during a surgery, and then after surgery, a whole bundle of non-pharmacological interventions, which are done typically by nurses. They're quite easy to do, and they're very effective, but they're not done systematically and routinely because they take extra time. And extra time is something that healthcare professionals, especially nurses, just don't have. So what ends up happening is nurses react when a patient has delirium. And at that point, like with dementia, there's very little can be done once you have the onset, instead of preventing. And in the balance, by preventing and reducing the incidence, healthcare professionals are actually saving a lot of time and money. So there's a lot that can be done, and the conversation is starting to change. And one of the reasons why I sometimes do things like this podcast, which I'm honored to do, is to help spread awareness of this problem and make sure that patients and relatives are aware that this is a complication, and ask the right questions to their clinicians, and make sure that they get the right care, so that they don't end up with these devastating outcomes.
What are the right questions to be asked? Is a preventative, or if a patient is over age of 60 or 55, perhaps, just to be on the safe side, what will be your advice to be able to prevent as much as possible? Because I can imagine most hospitals don't have this routine, rehab or prevention. Some may do, but in majority of, even across the European Union, it's up to the patients to know that, and they very limited often. They may come from a hard working class. They don't have the knowledge. They don't even know what's waiting for them on the other side.
Sure.
So what age perhaps, does it affect below 60 people, or just to be on the safe side? And then what are the questions, like, just as a list of questions you would recommend to be asked if somebody is going to have an operation, and for what type of procedure operations this is really important to take into account the potential side effects?
So it can affect people at any age. Even babies can suffer from delirium. The prevalence goes up significantly after the age of 60. So, and the older you get, the higher the incidence. So age is definitely one of the risk factors. It's not the only risk factor, which is why we use artificial intelligence to help predict who's at risk. It's very multifaceted. Like Alzheimer's, it's very difficult for even experts in Alzheimer's to look at somebody who's 60 or 70 and say, in 3 years, you're going to have Alzheimer's.
Yeah.
And the person next to them who's also that age, no, you're going to be fine. It's very difficult because there's lots of different risk factors. So the type of questions that they should be asking is, do you screen for delirium prevention risk, for delirium risk? Do you have preventive measures in place for reducing delirium. And you're right, most of the time the answer will be no or something similar to, they may say yes, but it may not sound very convincing.
Mm-hmm.
Can I have a loved one, my husband or wife or my son or whatever, can I have them in the recovery room when I come out of surgery, to be by my side? Because that's one of the things that can help significantly, is feeling comforted and feeling like you're not in a strange place where you don't know who the people are that are coming and going, and all the beeps and noises and sounds and stuff. And just having a conversation with the anesthesiologist and with the surgeon, and just having a feeling of, do they take this seriously, or are they just dismissing it as, oh, this is no big deal? And the type of surgeries that it can affect is almost any. The bigger the surgery, the more likely you will have delirium also. So cardiothoracic surgery has cardiac surgery has some of the highest incidence. 50 to 80% of patients will have delirium. Orthopedic surgeries, hips, knees, they also carry quite a high incidence. So it depends a little bit on what type of surgery, and how fit you are, if you're frail, if you have lots of comorbidity, those are also risk factors. So and I guess a question is, if you're old, frail, you have a lot of comorbidities, and your surgeon is saying, yes, you should have a knee replacement, is it really worth it? Like, yes, you might have a little more mobility, or you might have a little bit less pain, but can you manage with pain medication? Could you manage with a slightly less evasive surgery, like a keyhole surgery? Those are decisions that you can talk to with your doctor and see whether it makes sense to do something slightly less evasive.
Is there any other type of surgery? Maybe it could be a lung operation or kidney replacement. Does it affect any type of invasive surgery?
Yeah, it can happen to virtually anybody with any type of surgery. Yeah.
How people can take measures if the hospital does not have practices in place, which is very often the case? How could they get in touch with you, for example, or if they don't do that, what would be the very minimal steps they could take that can significantly improve the chances of minimizing that?
So, before a surgery, if it's elective, trying to be as physically and mentally fit as possible. So if the surgery is booked for a month from now, or so let's say 2 weeks from now, trying to do as much exercise as possible physically, eat healthy, do some brain activity, like some quizzes or word games, or chess or whatever, stimulate your brain. Those are things that's called prehab, actually. Those are things you can do yourself that can help. And then, as I said, asking for, make sure a relative is there with you in the room. Make sure that as soon as you come out of surgery and you wake up, that you have, if you're older and you have glasses, or you have, teeth or a hearing aid or something, that you have those available, and that they give them to you right away, so that you feel comfortable like normal. If possible, ask for a room with a window so you can see night and day and things like that. So these are little things you could do. But the main thing is, I think, that we need to continue to have these conversations so that patients don't have to ask these questions, so that hospitals take the right measures on behalf of patients and relatives. That's really the goal.
And what the hospitals can do regardless of which country we're talking about, if they don't have such measures, we know the case is there because the taxpayers often pay the cost unless it's a private hospital.
Mhm.
And they may not have these measures because it may cost more, but it actually costs less from what the statistic shows because it's so much more expensive to treat it if it comes than to
Mhm.
prevent it. So
Mhm.
if a general manager of a large hospital decides to implement that on that basis, what could be immediate steps they can undertake to implement that as a system, as a practice in their
Mhm.
hospital?
Mhm. Yeah, so a combination of things. One is to appoint a delirium team within the hospital. That doesn't have to be new hires, it could be existing hires. People who are champions who care about delirium. There's usually
Yeah.
always at least one or two, three people in the hospital. You know, somebody in internal medicine or a geriatrician or a head of nursing or somebody, and make them the, part of a delirium team. And then, embrace technology like ours, and use artificial intelligence to not replace a doctor, but to support a doctor in decision making. So our software is called a clinical decision support software.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's not telling the doctor what to do, it's assisting with a decision. So it's giving an objective score to a risk profile, stratifying that into risk groups from highest risk to lowest risk, and then helping through improved communication throughout the hospital setting, the perioperative setting, and making sure that there are measures to monitor compliance of certain things like screening, like prevention, like diagnosing. And yeah, those are some steps that they can do, just as we have a e-learning hub also, which clinicians and nurses can go to and learn more about delirium. And so there's a lot of different things they can do.
That's great. What is the best way to get in touch with you, John, if anybody wants to, you know, express an interest to speak about a topic with you and maybe with your organization?
Mhm. I would say, probably, thanks for asking that. Going to our website and just getting in touch, asking some questions. Say you're interested in learning more. We'd be very happy to hear from them.
We'll put the link in the podcast below after we finish. So we'll do this. Just talking about as your experience as a serial entrepreneur. Um,
Mhm.
how do you keep the team inspired in the ups and downs of a startup?
Great question. We So there's a few different things that I've learned over the years, and I think keeping a team inspired is probably one of the most important things you can do as a leader. If you try to lead through uh, force, through discipline, through uh, putting in policy, metrics, and trying to say, your competition, you're better than you're outperforming, and reviews and all these things, you're not going to get anywhere. If you try to lead through inspiration, uh, motivation, passion, then people will work for you, with you, because they want to, not because they have to. And you get 5 times the commitment. Um, and they'll also be much more likely to go through the difficult times with you because, all companies, large and small, will go through difficult times. And if your team are inspired, then they're likely to ride those difficult times with you. So some of the things I think are, you asked before the why. I think making sure that why resonates with them. What we're doing is trying to improve and save lives, and making sure that that's front and center to all conversations and communication internally and externally. The mission, basically, and instilling strong values in the company. So we put it right on our wall. We have values that include, collaboration and teamwork, caring and supportiveness, passion, creating measurable impact, ownership, listening and learning, something a lot of people don't do enough of, myself included. Being ethical and honest. And those are, I think, those values, they resonate within the team, and they also resonate externally when talking to potential customers or partners or investors. We also have you'll see on our website, we have a CCO, which is not the typical CCO. It's a dog, and it's our chief cuddling officer.
I thought you were going to say chief commercial officer.
Okay. I think inspiring the team is, and that starts with hiring. So finding people who are not just great at what they do, but who actually care, who are good, decent human beings. And I don't think HR spends nearly enough. Typically, leaders don't spend nearly enough time focused on who are they as an individual. Yes. Is this a good, decent person who I'm going to like to work with, and therefore other people in the team are likely to want to work with? Because, a lot of times you have a gap to fill. You find, you get a bunch of CVs with people who are brilliant at what, that filling that role technically or, mentally. That, they, the experience-wise, they have all the right metrics, but and then you think, okay, well, that'll solve the problem. It's maybe not somebody that I'm not so sure about what they're like, as a person. I think they're okay, but, better to wait. Find somebody who has maybe a little bit less skill, maybe a little less experience, but who's a decent person. And Simon Sinek has a really good piece on this, on the military, on the special forces, and how they will always choose somebody who is less fit, less experienced, but who has gut, drive, who has passion, who is a good person, who will have somebody's back. They will choose that person over somebody who's physically, mentally perfect, every time.
The question is, how do you assess that when you hire?
I think not so differently than how you assess, people you want to hang out with in life, like friends and, people you want in your circle, in your close circle. I think it's, and we all get that wrong too sometimes, but as we get older, I think sometimes we get a little bit better at filtering and finding people who are going to be supportive in our lives and who want you to succeed. I think that's a really important thing, especially as a leader. Like, if you focus on making sure that every person on your team does well and is successful and gets the spotlight and gets recognition, versus yourself and trying to, make sure that you get the limelight, you get whatever, the recognition and the applause for blah, 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 blah. If you focus on that, then they'll want you to rise. They'll want you equally. It's a karma thing. Comes around, goes around. They'll want you to do well and to shine. So yeah, those are some of the things that didn't always get right. Definitely made a lot of mistakes on the way, but I've done this a few times now, and I think I'm maybe learning a little bit.
I think sharing it was a great example. Like who's going to help the team when they barely can help themselves? It's like looking at that self-sacrifice of what you just said, Simon's example.
This little
And
guy wants some attention.
oh,
He's
so,
been since this started trying to get a little bit of attention.
so nice.
Hey.
What's the name?
This one is Simba.
Simba. Oh, nice.
Yeah, there's another one running around too.
That's great. Well, talking about human-centric approach, and I believe it's even more important in the era of AI, because AI is going to do a lot of the things that probably could have taken a long time before, but then the attention to the personal touch, the real care about each other, it makes even a bigger difference to the future. And how important is it for leaders to welcome the age of AI rather than fear of it? You know, what's your take on this? Because there's a lot of, as you know, it all comes again from that human-centric approach. Because AI will do what you ask them to do, and if it's put to anti-humanity and other things, it will do that. And it's just, there's always that fear, but probably the fear is more of the dark side of humans, or
for sure,
than actually the AI itself. What's your take on this? And how we as a society should look into AI, and how to take the best of it and manage the risks of it.
Such a huge question and such a relevant topic today. And it's good that it's being talked about so much. Yeah, I mean, so AI isn't going anywhere. It's here to stay, and it's only going to get better and better. And so, as a leader, you have to embrace it. And I think part of embracing it is making good choices about how you use this technology. What is the driving force behind it? So in our case, it's trying to improve lives and save lives. And in that respect, as a decision support software, we're not trying to replace humans. I think we're trying to give doctors more time with the patient so that they can communicate risk in a good, proper way. Or lack of risk, and have a conversation one-to-one instead of looking at a screen and trying to calculate things. Doctors these days spend 70% of their time on average looking at a screen instead of spending time with a patient, which is awful. AI, as you said, can be used for good or for bad, and it's really us in the driver's seat, at least for now. Hopefully it stays that way. But how do we act responsibly and ethically, and not be driven by greed? And that's a tough one. It's also very tough to put in place measures to protect us on a global scale, because some countries might abide, but what about those that don't? And then how do you have equal competition? I mean, it's such a big topic. And I don't honestly know the answer, and I don't know that many people do know the answer. I think it's just we have to be driven. We have to have a guiding drive, which is caring and doing good and being responsible and ethical. And AI is essentially learning from us. So the good, the bad. So the more we can focus on the good and teaching it like a child, in many ways, how you raise a child, you can raise a child to be ethical and responsible and thoughtful, or you can, or the opposite, and that will very largely dictate the outcome of that child.
That is a great analogy, and yeah, absolutely. That's why we even believe even more that really take how you achieve things, how you do things. Yes, results matters, and that will continue to be the case. But if we can, how we achieve them is equally important. If we can really set good examples to the future generation, and in this case to technology or AI, it'll make a profound difference. That's why we founded Leaders Who Care in the first place, to give stage to some of the most caring yet successful leaders around the world, so that we can hopefully inspire more. And as I said earlier, it should not be a thing called Leaders Who Care. Every leader should be about not just themselves, but about the community, the impact, their own team. And some of them may do, but they may not know how to do it better. So that's why we can cover their blind spots to people who can. So it's important to self-assess and see what are your strengths and weaknesses, and how, if you really care, you recognize what you need in order to make that positive impact across everything around you and everything you do, which is not an easy thing. But hopefully, with giving more examples, this is possible. And now technology being in favor of us, AI can be a great tool to save time, to do things, and help us a lot in that journey. And I really, really appreciate your analogy, John. And just
for sure.
coming back.
Yeah. No, there's so many topics that AI is, but can continue to help create a better world for us. Obviously climate change, environmental sustainability. If AI can help solve some of these problems, which unfortunately many governments are not doing nearly enough to focus on. Socioeconomic inequalities, obviously in my field, health and well-being, education. I think education is so important. I think education is so critical if we look to the future. If we try to solve problems right now, today, sure, we can do quite a bit. But if we focus on education for future generations, it's amazing what can happen. It can transform whole societies. Finland is a fantastic example. Used to have, I think, the worst education system in Europe, and then had an education reform, I think, in the 70s. And now they're like top of the world.
Amazing.
And what do you have? You have a country that's also listed as one of the best places in the world to live, even though it's freezing cold, and one of the best places in the world to live. And I think a lot of that comes from the education system. An incredible education system, even though they're a third world country, poor country. They have a 98% literacy in Costa Rica, ranked one of the top in the world, 30 or 40th, something like that. So there's a lot AI can do to support all of these fields.
That's why the last 20 years I spent time in Leader Academy and helping exactly with complementing the educational process.
Yeah,
really
well done for doing that.
People, and really thank you. And that to me is really important, because often we know in the traditional educational system a lot of things are missing, including values, including important really behaviors, appreciations. Not in every school, but generally speaking, there's a lot that we can do, and that with technology, with But it all comes down to care. That's why we if you really care and you love what you do, and you, as you said earlier, uh, good. I mean, I have a little bit of a different vision on whether you're a good person or not, because I separate the body with the spirit and mindset. So if the mindset is if the driver of a car and you drive the car into a ditch, who is one to blame, the body or the mindset? Often is the body who drove often is the mindset who drove the body or the car. So it's if the car is in perfect condition. So and we all at some time have the good and bad side in spiritual realm. You listen to is this good, is this not, and that's why the beginning of wisdom is the fear of personally of God. Why? Because in scripture is written, do not kill, do not lie. There's these principles that if you follow, and there's no single book in the world that if you follow would not dramatically improve your way of living, because the fear is no longer of people. It is actually, it's written in scripture. And that's why it's so important to focus in good in people. And I distinguish, if somebody is doing a bad thing, I may love the person, but not the act, because the act might be because of the mindset that was driven of this body. So, and that's why maybe it's also a weakness of me, because I'm looking at good in people and focus on that, because the good creates more good instead of the negative. Because looking at, for example, what Jesus did, he came here to not just help the ones who were in a perfect condition. He came to help the ones who needed help. So really the ones that were in a difficult or prostitute or this or this. So there was really people that were sick, that were unwell, that were crazy or tied up, all the ones who needed help. So I think it's very important to, as a society, to look at and not isolate people who have made mistakes or who even prisoners and others, because it's important to understand what mindset led them to do that, and really help in, and that goes in a day-to-day life, how you treat others. That's why I look for humility, because if you have humility, it prevents you from doing a lot of those mistakes, because humility allows you to learn, allows you to fail. People will not criticize you. Versus when you're arrogant and when you really disrespect others. So no, it's a big topic. Maybe another time we'll debate on this. But coming back to you, John, regarding your own journeys, because you have such a different background, you decided to do something so impactful in healthcare. Is it still a passion of yours when you talk about art and film? What sets your heart on fire? Really, and how do you take care of yourself to fill up your own cup in order to stay motivated and on fire?
So yes, I still love art and film, and I don't get to play in that arena too often these days. I do some things, personally. I play some guitar. I'll write some poems. Haven't painted in a while, but I think the drive for me is adventure and seeking new experiences and challenges, trying to do something that that hasn't been done before. I did the same. I did that also in film, where we were in creating new technologies that hadn't been done before, like in the Matrix movies and things like that, where we were trying things that were new, figuring out how to do it. And it's the same thing in healthcare. We're trying to figure out something new that hasn't been done before. And proud to say that we've actually have a solution now that's CE certified. It's a medical device. It's on the market, and it can predict the risk, and it can and is helping save lives right now. So the drive with this journey that we're all on is all about experiences and challenges, and that's what we take with us through our lives. And it's what inspires me, is to take on, learn, try things, fail, embrace the fail, try again. It's great. Love it.
Wonderful. Final thoughts for from yourself, and we always tend to ask this question, is if you're in a position to really have unlimited resources, or whether it's power or financial resources, to change one thing in the world or to make it more caring, more better world, what would that be? What are your hopes for the future of our world? And if you had a chance to do one thing, what would that be?
Great question. I think it would be, we already spoke about it, but I think it would be trying to improve education. Because, instead of control and competition and stress and standardized tests and, all these things taught by teachers who are completely unqualified, then go, have systems in place where teachers are super qualified and are selected among many, where they're selected not just for their expertise, but also for their warmth and their collaboration and their enthusiasm and encouragement. And, you end up teaching a generation and generations to come in a loving, caring, nurturing way, responsible, ethical way. And those children become our future. And so it's not a short-term fix, it's a long-term fix. But you just have to look at countries like Finland where they did that. And you have a balanced society. You have a society of, not perfect, of course, but far better than it was. And an example to other nations. So, I think I'd probably, if it was one thing, I'd probably focus on that.
Amazing. John, thank you so much for your time today, for sharing, for what you do. Thank you for being a leader who care, and may God bless you and your work and your family and everything you do, and really appreciate the work you do. Once again, thank you.
Thank you so much, Marian. It was a pleasure to get to know you a little bit. Thank you for sharing your story and your journey as well. And thanks for giving me a platform today. It was great.
It's an absolute honor. Thank you.
Take care.